Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
The Weekman was on the 18th of May 2016 from WBRN Boston Red Network. Interesting week. Chelsea Manning is in jail. Venezuelan embassy in Washington that was occupied by guests is no longer occupied by guests. They were in jail. They are out now, called the Protectors. The Venezuelan government is meeting with officials or someone from this so-called opposition in Venezuela via the Kingdom of Norway. It was announced by the President, Nicolas Maduro Moro. Very interesting week. A lot of events going on. Tariffs have been removed from steel and aluminum or aluminum, whatever you want to call it, on Canada and on Mexico. So this is within the trade regime. Tariffs are still on with China, and that part of the trade wars is still ongoing. We have Huawei there, and Huawei basically is given a little life, at least some of the customers in rural America. They're given 90 days to divest the equipment. A political move there to shut Huawei out of I did pronounce it correctly, out of much of the business in the American sphere of influence, we'll call it. And that has been a mixed bag, so to speak. We have the UK that's more or less called a partial ban on Huawei. Huawei, get it right. Anyway, Huawei there, it is a tech giant out of Beijing. And they have the best technology, it's said by many of the people that know, on 5G. And 5G is in very limited use in the U.S. I noticed Verizon is offering it in some very limited cities. Sprint will have it in Kansas City, I think Verizon in Chicago and other parts of the Midwest. And it'll be coming to other cities. 5G so far getting you about 800 megabits per second. Is some of what is coming that is on your mobile phone. So it hasn't gotten to the gigabit per second, but that's very, very fast. What you'll see is a proliferation of viewing on mobiles or smartphones or whatever you want to call them. That is a new era. Of course, new services will be offered. People can watch movies, They do now, but they can actually watch movies, Netflix. That will be more money in their coffers, and various other types of programming live on smartphones. How will this predict? How will this affect the desktops that are around? Well, it'll have an effect on some, but obviously people want to watch their movies in 50 plus screens, so that will still be, the home market will still be there, but on the road market would be there, and moving of portable data, thinking about things such as electronic filing used in the legal industry, that would be much faster, and various other things, not only using the mobile phone platform, but tablets, many of those out here. Tablets are becoming very popular. In fact, tablets, so-called tablets, or pads as we call them, not necessarily iPad, but you have a lot of Android type pads out there. They're becoming ubiquitous, no doubt about it. There are more and more of those out on the market, and it's becoming cheaper and cheaper. Now, G5, like much of the world now, is on a G4, and G4 itself, and in some countries less than G4, but fiber is becoming more and more. It's coming to nations that did not have fiber access in Asia. The Beijing people in Beijing are bringing it there. In the emerging markets, Kenya, etc., Nigeria, all across the African continent, that is how they are the ones that are bringing increased cable service there. So speeds are increasing, and as speeds are increased worldwide, and the ability of countries and regions to install this 5G, and it's good for us. Many of our people are mobile, whether they be on a Stitcher, iHeart, Spreaker, YouTube. I noticed on YouTube, our broadcast, and this is an automatic thing, were rating us as entertainment. Well, yes, politics is entertainment, but we should be under news. The categories, and this is one of the very strange things, many of these categories are stagnant and not dynamic. They don't reflect the present day world, period. And that in itself is not very good. It's sort of like surveys you get from various computer manufacturers, that the categories be very, very limited as to what you do. Now they're becoming much more when you specify title and what the company does, and that was very limited. So we see that in the public sphere also. And while we're on that topic, the Google people, if you use your Gmail to buy products, I noticed a few of ours, not very many, that we bought a product and it showed up on the product page. You can go to your Gmail account and find that it is there, and some people say the removal is a little bit different. Also this week, while we're doing sort of a roundup here, and sorry it's not in as much order as it should be, but Bill de Blasio, he's the mayor of New York City, has entered the race, and we'll go in a minute or so to Charlie Cook and talk about the number of people in the Democratic part of the race and the status of the race from the Cook Report. One comment we'll make on the Cook Report is an independent report, and he is one of the best handicapper in America, in my opinion. But he does need to diversify his shop. There are no people of color that are there, and this has to be one of the major themes of the 2020 electoral season, that we need to get more African Americans CBS, their electoral unit was hit there to bring in more African Americans, and we need to put that demand on all of these people that are in the political business, whether they be CBS. We put it on old Nate Silver. He found one. I'm not sure if she's there now. We need to check that, but there needs to be much more diversity. Silver is a little bit different. That is part of ESPN, set up the ABC, and when we look at sports, it would be the National, the Basketball League, the NFL, etc. Even Tiger with the golfing deal. He didn't make the cut for the PGA, but he won the Masters, so it probably doesn't matter. But all these things bring viewers and participation. Now, obviously, there are many, many more outlets now out there. There are African Americans that and people of color that are doing modeling. They just need to come more in more prominent positions and in the campaigns. Of course, Donna Brazile managed Al Gore's campaign, and various other positions there. We go back to Ron Brown, who managed Bill Clinton's campaign. So there have been African Americans out there, but generally it's very sparse. Even in Barack Obama's administration, there were some African Americans there, but in the campaign there were few that had prominent positions, and this is what happens when you do not make the demands. We'll have to talk to Jesse Jackson about this, and Al Sharpton, to a certain extent, has made some of those demands, needs to make more. The national leader at the National Action Network, and we have in the past covered his activities at the National Action Network, the Saturday morning meeting. We'll start doing that again. We're starting to expand. One of the problems we've had is so much electoral activity in pre-activity, we'll call it, that people kicked their campaigns off in January. Amy Klobuchar in literally a snowstorm, and some before that, and just the sheer number of people that are running and the sheer number of events. We had Venezuela there, and that event that stretches from Caracas to Washington, D.C., and now to Oslo in Norway. So in other words, all these events are moving here. We try to cover them today. We'll be talking about the Australian election there, the Conservative that is running for another term, and the Labour Party candidate in Australia. We'll go to that. So let's sort of move along here. We're kind of running a little bit, well, not actually behind, we'll say, but a little bit slower than we need to. We'll open the national part with Charlie Cook. To start trimming is his. They have Bullock out of Montana. De Blasio will get into the race for president. Democrats, the Democrats will be one candidate short of 2 dozen, and over a baker's dozen. It's a good bet that this herd will be called some by the 4th of July. Well, possibly so. Whenever I use the NFL, the NCAA basketball tournament bracket as an analogy for the Democratic presidential nomination, I can count on one friend who is extremely knowledgeable about Democratic politics to shake his head and rightly argue that the voters cannot be conventionally sorted by tiny boxes, demographics, ideology, culture. Thankfully, there are going to be 68 competitors in March Madness. There were. To a certain extent, my friend is right. Real people view things in a way that may or may not seem logical to others, and things are often not terribly rigid. This includes candidates themselves, who can't be packed into brackets by obvious identity politics labels. For instance, Kirsten Gillibrand, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren are all European female senators. Gillibrand is running on more women's issues than the latter. Cory Booker, Kamala Harris are both African American senators. but neither focus exclusively on race. Well, no one running for president would. At the same time, there are certain types of voters who are looking for the same kind of candidates and appear as each other and may recoil against other contenders. It would take a particular long conversation to assert whether a certain voter was more likely to be partisan to someone like Bernie Sanders or Warren or someone along the line of Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar. There will be a winding down to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and the Final Four. It's just that no one will run exclusively as a single bracket. In fact, a successful candidate will surely demonstrate crossover appeal and compete amongst different audiences. Try another analogy, the reality TV show Survivor. Oh boy. DJ Trump had something to that nature. He called it The Apprentice. Rather than try to figure out who will win the nomination and make the Final Four, let's focus on the first dozen or so, or a dozen who aren't likely to make it to Labor Day. 4 months from now, these candidates, like Survivor contestants, have certain opportunities, but also challenges the opportunities of potential breakthrough events such as cable TV town halls, debates, the events sanctioned by the Democratic Party are scheduled for the 26th of June and 27th, half the contendants each night, and July 31st and 30th and 31st, candidates will try to dead level best to stay alive, viable, hoping for breakthrough performances of something better known establishment contenders to stumble underperform. But unless the candidates are drawing ratings and buzz from their cable hits, and unless they are at least registering in the polls, they're not likely to get invited back. Well, the same thing happened with the Republicans. There's also a whole complicated business of who does and who doesn't qualify for each round of debates based upon the criteria from the DNC on polling performance, fundraising, numbers of unique donors, with as many as 23 candidates, with Bernie and Biden garnering as much as half of the vote in early polls. This is going to get a pretty brutal pretty quickly for many, and in short, opportunities will be fewer and fewer for the half of the field by the end. Then there's a big challenge fundraising in the next big quarterly report card that comes out in mid-July. Some will turn impressive federal election commission reports, while others will be underwhelming, if not downright embarrassing. Resources are often critical to keeping the campaign staff and the rent paid. With the internet and ActBlue fundraising platforms making it cheaper and easy to raise money. That's a very important point there. Some of the candidates have transferred funds from, say, their Senate campaign accounts. But after that money is gone, they'll have to rely on new money. Contributions contributed significantly to presidential campaigns. Reporters will run burn rate stories, the percentage of campaigns quarterly fundraising that is spent, and how quickly. One intriguing metric here is garnering the interest is the weekly Google search numbers for each candidate. The Cook Report's Allie Flynn has a complete weekly search counts from Google Trends analysis team measuring who is being Googled. Well, you can also be other things can happen to you there with other search engines. The numbers released by Google are not actual numbers of searches. They are sampling all searches excuse me, rather than counting one by one. The data is reported with the top search candidates assigned, 100 rating, and then the rest down from there. This week, for example, Biden was the most searched, thus given 100, followed by Bernie at 32.45. Alfred E. Newman, otherwise known as Mia Pete, at 31.4. Kamala Harris at 24.1. And Beto at 14.4. Elizabeth Warren at 12.66. The rest of the field was in single digits. Biden, Buttigieg, Harris, and Sanders have each had 3 weeks on top this year. And Beto 2 weeks, and Gillibrand and Klobuchar, Warren 1. And a lot of this is how people are referred to in the media. And that is where it is a very, very important period. Let me just make sure of that. Now, we spent a lot of time on the South Carolina race here. Well, we'll come back on the Monday morning quarterback to it. And this is a Washington Post article here, an opinion piece, op-ed piece, what do you want to call it. And on the 16th by Mark Feason, I believe, there. The left is starting to take aim at Joe Biden. At a conference this week, liberal activists booed when told Biden wanted to find a middle ground on climate change. Well, this is coming out. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez replied, "No middle ground is right," and declared, "I would be damned if the same politician who refuses to act comes back today and says we need a middle ground approach to save our lives." Bernie Sanders joined her in criticism. There is no middle ground. Now, this is going to be very interesting for some of these middle-of-the-road candidates. And depending on which constituencies they appeal to. When we get to polling, we'll talk about some of these polls. There was one poll that counted people 18 to 49. And, of course, that favored Joe Lunchbox Biden. You have to be very careful on how these polls are taken. Biden supporters hearsay is that he believes in working with Republicans. Somebody called heresy. Says on the stump that Trump is an aberration. And predicts that the president defeated Republicans will work towards bipartisan reforms. Biden insists is the only way to get things worthwhile done. We'll see. The nation cannot function without generating consensus. Well, you won't have that around here. Many liberals believe, and now this is strange. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put it that capitalism is irredeemable. Now, she is a progressive. Now, we need to separate these out. Biden would be more of a liberal. And in most countries, a liberal is a conservative. Let's get this straight here. We'll go to Australia and straighten out a little bit of this. The Obama-Biden approach to government is now considered too moderate. Well, the late Jerry Pippin talked about that and called Obama and Eisenhower Republican. And Jerry was around working conventions when JFK was nominated. Anyway, like Barack Obama did, they want to spend tens of trillions of dollars to replace every vehicle that uses a combustion engine, bring high-speed rail into every corner of the country, and upgrade and replace every building in the U.S. and eliminate all fossil fuels. Well, nobody's ever said that. Healthcare, there's no longer made a pretense of promising voters that they will keep their health care like President Obama did. They openly advocate abolishing private insurance. I guess he's talking about they. That is the progressives. Biden support for the public option that would give Americans a choice of buying into a Medicare plan, or is seen as a capitulation there. There's no choice in the brave new world of democratic socialism, this person calls it. but he would still let you keep your regular insurance also. Biden used to go around talking about how he worked with Jesse Helms. You won't hear much of that. Together they passed legislation called the Helms-Biden Act to reform the United Nations and to castigate it and castrate it. Cut deals to restructure the State Department. As chairman ranking member, we passed some of the most significant legislation passed in 40 years. He explained in a 2015 speech. Old Jesse Helms was a right-winger there. You won't see much of that anymore, and this is where Biden is out of step with the steps, so to speak. And let me just check our time here. I'm not sure how much Nate Silver we'll go to. We'll roll on here. We'll go to the story out of Nevada. Now, women call the shots there, and the majority of legislators in Nevada are women, period. This is in the Nevada Senate, when a Republican colleague defended an age-old law requiring doctors to ask women seeking abortion, the century-old, were they married. This is consensus. Couldn't help but find back a man is not asked his marital status before he gets a vasectomy. Well, she's right about that. Anyway, consensus, she's 32, is part of a wave of younger women around the nation, many of them younger than 40 years old. So that is a big change in the composition of the American body politic. In Congress, 1/4 of lawmakers are female. That means roughly 100 there. That is very important, and there will be more than is at present time. Female majority is having a huge effect. More than 17 pending bills deal with sexual assault, sexual trafficking, sexual misconduct, and some measures aimed at making it easier to prosecute offenders. I can say with 100% certainty that we won't have 3 conversations a few years ago. These conversations a year ago, excuse me. That's Teresa Thompson. None of these bills would have seen the light of day. Well, that is definitely true there. Kensiner, who became a political director of the Cannery Workers Union, the Culinary Workers Union, sorry about that, 57,000 strong before she turned 30, and one of those organizations emerged in Nevada. You have that emerge in California also. Sandy Fluke is around there. Said it has trained twice as many female candidates ahead of the 2018 midterm elections as it has in the previous 12 years. Nevada, where women already had 40% of the seats, 63 lawmakers there, 11 are African American, 9 are Latinos, 1 is a Native American there, and Rochelle Nguyen is 41, is the first Democrat female Asian American. So it's kind of a rundown of where they are going and who was defeated whom here. And let me finish this up. There's a culture change. Carson City is a tiny frontier town cradled by snow-capped mountains. Beautiful place. Even now, female lawmakers in both parties say they received anonymous phone calls from men commenting on their looks and threatening sexual violence. Well, anonymous, yeah, no doubt until they can catch up with them. And these are some of the states that legislators are in. Women make up to 24% of Congress. And legislators that have 10% of women, South Carolina, Alabama, Wyoming, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Mississippi. And states that have at least 30%, Minnesota, Hawaii, Georgia, Indiana, Montana, Iowa, Florida, and California. New Mexico, New Hampshire, New York, and Connecticut 40% or more Vermont, Arizona, Michigan, Arkansas, interesting, Arkansas, Delaware, Maryland, Oregon, and Washington. The 50% are, actually it's 49% Colorado and 50% Nevada. So these are some of those, and we start looking at female legislators by a nation ranking here. That's what we wanted to get to. Sort of cut some things out, but this is important here. Rwanda, 50% there. Rwanda. There, Cuba is number 2. Bolivia is number 3. Nevada is number 4. They have 51%. Some of these have more than 50%. Mexico, a little less than 50%, I guess about 48%. Sweden, then Colorado at 47%. So we get a little bit of a benchmark, a calibration. Costa Rica, a little bit shy there, I don't know, 46, 45. Nicaragua, and then South Africa, and the U.S. 24%. And you can see where female legislators are in terms of these nations. Cuba, Bolivia, Mexico, Sweden, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, in South Africa, all above these, the trends, where the trends are going. A new generation, a new point of view, no doubt about that. And this is from Selena Torres, never expected to be there. She's a 23-year-old teacher who helped Hispanic and Latino students learn English. Said she was inspired to run when she heard Trump saying awful things about immigrants. So a lot of people are coming in here. It is a new day, period. And let me we won't get into the previous to the Australian elections. Let me just refresh this. This is ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Company, and we now have numbers coming in here. We get rid of some of our protection here. Labor has 24. They need 76 to win. And the right-wingers have 11, and there are 2 others out there. The election campaign is over, and a long night of voting counting is underway. That's in Australia. And we'll keep you up to date throughout the day, and we'll have a special programming on this. Voting count is underway in all states and territories. Non-stop coverage here from them. And there is some live coverage also here. And we just went up to 19. So as we move along here, the Conservatives are still stuck at 8. And some maps are coming here. We'll go to The Guardian. Now this is exit polls. The Guardian Australia exit polls show Labour ahead of Coalition 52 to 48. Live politics there. And Bill Shorter, he is a Labour candidate. He is running against the right-winger. Who is this right-winger? Who is the right-winger? Let's see, so we can get that part of it right. Live results coming in. Throughout the broadcast, we'll do the sports, and we'll come back to this. The coalition has 2 seats, Labour, and this is some of various people coming in. Climate change, incidentally, was the number 1 issue, and usually it's healthcare, taxes, immigration, so forth and so on. The Labour Party, where it is going here, and so when we have our special report later in the day, D is a traveling day. It's up 2 minutes ago to 25. So they're not quite halfway yet. Labour is not, but it is moving on. Scott Morrison, he's the right winger. after 5 weeks of campaign. Only 5 weeks in Australia. Incidentally, it's also mandatory to vote in Australia. Let's go to some polling here. This is from last week. We had a Fox poll set Biden at 35, Bernie Sanders at 17, Elizabeth Warren at 9, Kamala Harris at 5, Buttigieg at 6, Beto O'Rourke, Klobuchar at 2, and Booker there. So he was ahead, this Biden, by 18 points according to the Fox News poll, but we have head-on-head here. Biden is leading Trump according to Fox News by 11 points. Bernie Sanders leading DJ by 5 points. Elizabeth Warren by 2. Harris and he are tied. Buttigieg, Trump is ahead of him by 1 point. And the approval rating, here's Gallup. We almost missed Gallup here. Is at 42 here for Gallup. We always like to get them out here. And we'll get back to them in a second here. And if we go to other polls here, the Quinnipiac poll had Biden ahead by 36. I believe this is the one that had a kind of a very strange situation going there. I wouldn't pay much attention to it. In matchups against DJ Trump, he's up by 11. Bernie Sanders by 7. Warren by 3. Excuse me. Trump and Harris are tied. And there in that particular race, O'Rourke is Trump's actually leading him by 2. Now this is a Quinnipiac poll. I was told how to pronounce that. Anyway, we'll get it right. YouGov is at 44%. The Reuters poll at 40%. The Morning Consult, that's the Politico, runs that one's at 41. That poll there, and so forth and so on. The Morning Consult, they had Biden up by 20. The Emerson poll, that's out of Boston, they had Biden up by 8. More realistic, that was on a Tuesday and Wednesday. The other poll, that was the Quinnipiac poll, and Fox was on a Friday. Now this is the Cadillac here, we'll call it, at 42%. This is Gallup. And 52% disapprove of DJ Trump. This is May 1st through May 12th. And the last time they were up in April, he was at 46. So he's dropped, and this is DJ Trump, he has dropped. And then he was at 45 early in April, and he was down at 39. So this is a Gallup here, the Gallup poll, and let me see, where are we going here? We're going to ESPN and do the sports. Okay, the Raptors and Bucks. Milwaukee leads that series 2-1, 2-0. The Bucks 125. The Raptors of Toronto 103. Bucks have a very good team this year. And what do the Cubs do? Well, we'll see. We'll get to that in a minute here. Blues score twice in Game 4 to even the series. Blues at 2-1. This is National Hockey League over the Sharks. And this series is now tied at 2-2. This is a quest for the Stanley Cup. Alright, let's go to Major League Baseball. And I guess we'll have to do on the Monday morning quarterback and see who won the PGA. I don't have those up here right now. In Major League Baseball, we have the Yankees 4-3 over the Rays. The Cubbies had a slugfest in D.C. Unfortunate Nationals. On the other end, 14-6 there, Cubbies over the Nationals. The Rockies in Philadelphia. Phillies are 5-4. The Orioles and Cleveland. Cleveland's been stumbling lately. 5-1 Orioles over Cleveland. In Cleveland, the Astros and Red Sox in Fenway Park. Astros in a league play. 3-1. The Athletics and Tigers in the Motor City Athletics 7-2. The Dodgers and Reds in Cincy. The Dodgers shut the Reds out 6-0. the Mets and Marlins in Florida. It was the Marlins 8-6. The Brewers in Atlanta, it was Atlanta 12-8. President Carter's probably happy. The Cardinals and Rangers in Texas. Cardinals lose another game here. Rangers 7-3. Blue Jays and White Sox on the south side of Chicago. Blue Jays 10-2. Giants and D-backs in the desert. D-backs shut out the Giants 7-0. And the Royals and Angels in California, it was Angels 5-2. The Pirates and Padres in San Diego, it was the Pirates 5-3. And finally the Twins and Mariners in Seattle, the Twins 7-1. And I think we had that playoff game 2-1. The Blues over the Sharks. San Jose Sharks in a Stanley Cup type tournament here. It's now, this is the Western Finals. 2-2 is the tie of there. I don't know where the PGA is going here. Tiger didn't make the cut. He missed the cut. And Brooks capable of makes history. Well, there's a story there. Why is it okay Tiger isn't too disappointed about having the weekend off? Well, he's off when he won the Masters, so the Tiger is happy. And so goes sports, so go us. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback on a Monday morning. Let's see, we'll take one more look at the Australian elections. Where are we? Australia. We're here somewhere. So far, so the so-called coalition 7-6 Labour 6 seats here. This is from the Guardian, their live broadcast here, and it's coming in. And let's go to let's see, who are we here? Is it 28? I think they have it in the red here. I want to make sure that our color coding is what it should be here. And kind of interesting situation here. Shows a stage here and where we are with it. Let me just go back. This is ABC. The vote, who will be the next PM. It was a record 4.7 million votes were cast today. So getting in the results of what is going on here in Australia. I'm not sure. I guess 43%. This is Tony Abbott here. They're coming in various parts of Australia. Too early to report of that particular situation. Counting is on way in all states, territories, except Western Australia, where polling is still open, evidently, in Western Australia. Okay. So it's early there. They are counting and counting away. Let's go to the BBC for their coverage. No doubt they cover the Australian elections also. This is live here from the BBC in its so-called final hours. They don't really have... Now, they have a record 16.4 million Australians, are registered to vote. And we just gave a number here. The Liberal National Coalition is fighting to stay in power. Now, this is the point we wanted to make. The Liberal National Coalition, those are the conservatives. And in many states, and this is coming to the U.S. here, finally that the liberals would be more conservatives, and that's where it puts Joe Biden. The Liberal National Coalition is Scott Morrison, and the first exit polls indicate a win for Bill Shorter, and he is a Labor. And I'm not certain at this point. Coalition has 10 seats, the Labor has 9 now. This is Guardian, and we go back. They are at this Liberal coalition are at 47. The Labor is at 31 so far coming in there. We'll leave it at that. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback on the political side. A numbers man presentation of This Week in Economics. Our macroeconomics presentation is up there, and we were looking at some of the numbers coming in. They look good from Spotify and also from Spreaker and Stitcher. And we're working on getting a YouTube consolidated here. So this is where we are on the 18th of May 2019. And we'll be back with later in the day, probably, I'm not sure how late in the day, Eastern Time. We are, around 5:15 now. Good day.